Well, I'm delighted to welcome into studio now Douglas Kruger, and I've been going through his book. He's got a wonderful book called How to Make Your Point Without PowerPoint, and it's really all the secrets about public speaking without all the katunda that we sort of bring with us, which we're almost like a crutch, aren't they, Douglas?
It's public speaking without the baggage. Yeah,
yes.
Hi, Tamara.
Yes, hi. Welcome to you.
Thank you so much.
Now, just tell me, what is the secret to effective public speaking?
All right. Well, in fact, one of the primary things that we do as anyone who stands up and leads or persuades is we tell stories. And the heart and soul of this book is saying that PowerPoint, although it started off as a brilliant medium and a good idea, has become such a go-to crutch that it's actually doing more damage than good. There are so many tools available to us in terms of how to engage and persuade a group of people. I mean, humanity has spent thousands of years studying how to do this. And, you know, if we think back on it, some of the most famous speeches in history, there were no accompaniments, there were no slides, there were no charts, there were no graphs, and if you actually, again, if you think back on it, how many famous speeches can you remember that referred to a graph on a slide? It is not the most effective or persuasive way to capture an audience's heart and soul.
Do you think it's about delivering it correctly, though? Because as you're speaking, I'm thinking, okay, Winston Churchill, because you immediately know those lines because they've been played so often.
We shall fight on the beaches.
Yes,
we shall fight on the landing grounds.
No, they make me cry. It's dreadful. A complete sort of
Then
wet.
I'll knock it off.
But what he did was he learnt it off by heart, and he practiced in front of the mirror. But is that what we should all be doing?
Well, actually, let's take Winston Churchill for just a second. And I mean, I do those two lines comically. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds. But think about the rhythm in terms of his delivery there. He's taking a basic phrase and repeating it in ways that are hypnotic and mesmerizing.
True.
Now, that's something that we don't really study when we boot up PowerPoint and say, what do I do for graph number 1 or chart number 1?
You're right.
Yeah,
it's not sexy, is it?
Not at all. He's also painting mental imagery. I mean, we're talking beaches, we're talking fields, we're talking landing grounds, and he's appealing to the imagination. You know, I mean, the first argument we might bring against that is, sure, it was, over 70 years ago. But, I mean, take a look at one or listen to one of Obama's newer speeches.
Oh, wow.
And just decipher the imagery and the amount of storytelling that goes into a speech even today. And again, there's a leader who's not using charts or graphs.
Now, you see, that speech that Barack Obama made at Madiba's funeral.
Yes, we can. Oh, yes.
No, at Madiba. Now, that really just knocked everything else into a cocked hat, didn't it?
Well,
It
absolutely.
was just fantastic.
Yeah.
But how does he deliver something like that? Has he got notes? Is it coming up on a screen, or what's happening?
Well, a couple of little insights into Obama's particular presenting. He actually has a scriptwriter. He doesn't write his speeches himself.
Yes.
And his scriptwriter is incredibly
young. Give that man
young.
a raise.
Yeah. When Obama started out, his scriptwriter was in his, I believe, mid to late 20s. So that's just an interesting little aside for you there.
Yes.
But generally speaking, he does speak with an auto cue. Now, the structure of my book, and I always do this, use this structure, it's 50 ways to.
Yes.
So this one is 50 ways to present without PowerPoint, and one of them is in fact how to use an auto cue the way Obama does, and I reference him. But now there are many ways of using an auto cue. One of the reasons that we like to fall back on PowerPoint is we effectively use it as our notes. We're scared we're going to forget what we say, so we put it all up on the screen and we read it out to our audience. Now, there's a chapter in the book where I talk about the poor man's auto cue. And the title is perhaps a bit misleading because this is actually exceptionally clever, and I've done it before myself. What you do is you walk into your room and you take, say, your top 4 points that you want to deliver. And from the stage, from the speaking area where you will be delivering your message, look out in front of you. Now pick 4 things that you can use as mnemonic devices to remind you of your points. So, for example, you might look at the clock and that might remind you of the urgency, the timing behind the project you're going to speak about. What you don't want to do is, say, pick on someone in the audience, because if they get up and leave, you're in trouble. Yeah. So something that's a permanent fixture. But it's remarkable how easily you can structure and remember an in-depth presentation without slides.
How interesting. Now, you've said here structures that replace slides, and you've got 15 here. Learn to speak well. There are plenty of people who are as bright as anything, but just don't deliver. Do not speak well.
Richard Branson is an unfortunate example of that. He's booked worldwide as a speaker, and it really is based on his persona, his history, what he's achieved. But he's not the world's best speaker.
No.
In fact, he's a little cringeworthy if you sit in the audience. It's not a well-delivered presentation.
Yes.
But he gets by on on the personality and the history and so on. Now, on the other side of that, and again, a gentleman who doesn't speak with slides, if you've been to a Clem Sunter presentation,
oh, yes,
any time over the last 10 years, he's mesmerizing,
he
absolutely mesmerizing. And Clem does not use slides at all. And if you think about the complexity, the nature of the content that he delivers, I mean, he's talking about political movements around the world. He's talking about changes in industry. He's talking about incredibly complex data, but not a single slide. In fact, what he does, and this is one of the structures that I reference, is he uses, in his case, his latest speech is the one about the flags. So 60 minutes worth of intense, high-content speaking divided into 3 or 4 flags. Now, if you think about it, that's not hard to remember. You only need to remember your 3 major flags for things that we need to notice in the world around us. And then for each flag, you remember perhaps 2 or 3 stories or examples. And there you go, job done.
Okay. He also speaks very naturally, and
yes.
I don't know whether you learn to do that, or it's something that one could learn to do.
A Toastmaster might argue too naturally. Clem is a lovely personality. He stands with a hand in his pocket in his sort of baggy pants, leans against a lectern wearing his baggy jersey, and laughs at his own jokes.
No, exactly. could just as easily be a tracksuit.
But you know, having said that, the folks from the Mauritius Institute of Directors, I did a little work with them a while ago, and they confided in me that they keep having him back for that reason. They adore him. They say it's so much personality.
Yes.
And in fact, personality is one of the things that slides and graphs rob us of. And the argument that I make in the book is I say that when you are stuck to a stop-start structure where you have to flick on one slide after another, it's essentially creating a staccato rhythm.
Yes.
It's like playing a very amateurish version of chopsticks where your timing is set. When we speak free form and we're able to tell stories and get into agile language and narrative,
yes,
we're more like Beethoven. We are more compelling, more rhythmic, and just more interesting.
You talk about speaking in metaphors. Can you just give an example of one?
Oh, I love metaphors.
Rather nice one in the book, actually. It's quite funny.
Yeah. Well, a couple of years ago, we chatted about the Own Your Industry book, and I referenced Jeremy Clarkson as the master of the modern metaphor. And Jeremy, of course, has been sort of knocked off his perch for the time being. I think he'll be back.
I'm sure he'll be back.
But if you, a brilliant resource for that is clarksonisms.com. Go and have a look at some of the things that he said. But it's the idea of taking the heart and soul of what you're trying to communicate and turning it into a simple picture story. It's the art of saying it's like. And it's astonishing how technical your information can be and how simple you can make it for your audience when you use a metaphor, the art of saying it's like. I had an example a few years ago where I did some work with the chief financial officer of a financial services company, and a lovely man whose own staff threatened to revolt if he didn't get some public speaking training. So I sat down with him for a little while, the head of a roadshow, and I asked him, what is it in essence that you're trying to say? And he took me through his, I think it was at the time, 75 different slides with squiggly lines and charts and graphs. I mean, it's really enough to put you into a coma. Death by PowerPoint. And I said, condense this for me. What's the message? Because having the information is half of our job. Making it come alive is the balance. That's the important part. And after a little bit of head scratching, he said, well, realistically, we were going into recession a while ago. We were as terrified as the people we're going to be speaking for on this roadshow, but there's a glimmer of hope and we're leading them in that direction. So what we did is we turned his entire presentation into a small story metaphor about walking through a darkened forest, taking their hand in a moment of crisis and leading them toward the light. And he peppered it with a couple of poignant facts and figures that made the message come alive. But really it was about the idea that he was trying to communicate. That's the heart and soul of thought leadership. You're not supposed to be a journalist reporting stats.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be a thought leader creating a brand. And then to get all of the information out afterwards, he handed out handouts at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're not board rigid.
Yeah, we tend to do it the other way around. We use the
Yes.
handouts as our slides.
Yeah. No, it sounded like a very good story, that. And can you imagine being that chap who can't? Are you called in much by companies who say, look, we've got this speaker, but he's just not coming up to scratch. Everyone's losing the will to live. You know, can you come up in and help? Do you?
I don't actually bill myself as a presentation skills coach or trainer.
Yes.
Predominantly what I do is I actually speak at conferences, so 60-minute keynote presentations, which of course means that I get to see all the disasters. I live in a world of death by PowerPoint. And of course, I've I've made a lot of the mistakes myself. So I have a sense for what works and what doesn't. I do relatively high-end coaching these days, so leadership teams and so on. But as I say, I don't actually bill myself as a presentation skills coach per se.
Do you advocate audience participation at all?
That's an interesting and complex question. Yes and no. Here's the no.
You've got to be sure about it.
Well, no, I'll take a different path on that one.
Okay.
The no for me is anything that glorifies the speaker. I'll give you the most obvious example of that. It's someone standing up and saying, "You look wonderful today. Give yourselves a round of applause." What on earth is that?
No, that's dreadful.
You're wasting our time. You're wasting the audience's time. It's fluff for the sake of fluff.
Dare I say it? That sounds very American.
Yes, yeah, very much so.
And does that happen often there?
Yes. Now, having said that, I maintain that some of the world's best speakers and some of the world's worst speakers are American. And that's a very bad habit that has crept in from the United States. Absolutely. So when we talk about audience participation, yes, if it's done in a classy way. For example, and here's the simplest one, but it's very powerful, just the use of hypothetical questions. So when I deliver my message, I create little story scenarios that are aspirational in nature for the audience, and I make the audience live through it. I say, can you imagine yourself in 2 years from today? This is what you're struggling with. This is what you're going through.
Okay.
Imagine if this happens in your world. And I may ask hypothetical questions like, have you ever felt so angry that? Now, that's audience participation,
But
whether
you're
or
not
not they know it.
asking them to raise their hands.
I don't want them to stand on their chairs, jump up and down, massage the person next to them. Oh, for heaven's sake. I hate that myself, so I won't do it to my audiences.
Yes. No, well, that makes great sense. And I have to say that it looks like a really good, really useful book for those people who are who need to get up and speak in public. And I have to agree with you. PowerPoints really do seem to be a bit of a thing of the past. And when you see a speaker get up and he's got no notes and he just speaks, you just know you're in for you hope that you're in for
You hope, yes. There's obviously a qualification there, which is, are they good at what they do? And that's why my solution number one to speaking without PowerPoint is, and it sounds very simple, simplistic even, be a good speaker. There's a lot entailed in that, and the rest of the book gives you the how to be a good speaker.
Do you advocate people, obviously this is invaluable, this is a fantastic book, but do you think that people, when they have to practice, should go to some organisation like Toastmasters?
Well, I've been a member. In fact, actually, I started my speaking career through Toastmasters, not knowing that there was such a creature as a paid professional speaker. And it's now what I do full time.
Yes.
Absolutely. I'm still a huge advocate of the organisation, and I speak at a lot of their district conferences, in fact, increasingly around the world, which is a joy and a pleasure for me. I think the great benefit of Toastmasters is what one of the Toastmasters past world champions, Craig Valentine, calls the three things that you need most in life, which is stage time, stage time, stage time. It's the opportunity to just get up and speak. And it's amazing how quickly you can become proficient with a lot of practice, and how bad you can be at something without the practice. And just a sort of a silly little sideline note, for no particular reason, just because I wanted to, I've been trying to learn Spanish recently, and I'm astonished at how hard it is to be proficient in something that you don't get to practice every day. And coming back to things like reading a book in English or standing up and speaking in front of an audience, which I've been doing for 13 years now, I realize how hard won proficiency is. And I think one of the downsides to public speaking is that the only time most people ever get to practice is live in front of an audience.
You're right.
Yeah, and that's not the same thing as deliberate practice. There's an equation that talks about how talent works. And deliberate practice is really when you break something down into its small components and build it back up again and do it over and over and over again. Now, that's missing for most people in the equation for talent when speaking in public. They never get the chance to do it, as it were, offline. So there are exercises you can do, speaking in front of a mirror and so on, but nothing is quite as valuable as having, say, a Toastmasters club or a real audience to actually speak to.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. Douglas Kruger, thank you so much. Now, is there any way that people can get hold of you or look at a website that you may have?
Yeah, for sure. If you'd like to actually watch me do a presentation or read any of my articles and so on, it's www.douglaskruger.co.za. There's a little newsletter that you can sign up for if you want. It's called Your Monday Morning Motivator, from amateur to expert, become the greatest in your game.
There you are.
He said dramatically.
Okay.
And also Twitter at Douglas Kruger.
Fantastic. Well, the book is called How to Make Your Point Without PowerPoint. It's published by Penguin. And I do thank you. Nice to see you again, Douglas.
Lovely. You too. Thank you.